Good morning. Today marks the last full week of this election campaign. I've said before that this election is a choice between economic recovery with the Conservatives and more borrowing, more debt, higher taxes, and higher prices with the Liberals and NDP. But this election is also about trust, about whether or not we want to reward Justin Trudeau for breaking his promise and calling an unnecessary $600 million election in the middle of a pandemic. In the last few weeks, Justin Trudeau has not talked about the future of our country. He has not provided a plan for Canada, but instead veered into personal attacks and American-style misleading politics in an election he called for himself only. The differences between Justin Trudeau and myself are stark. I grew up in the suburbs. My neighbors were auto workers. My dad worked for General Motors. When Mr. Trudeau was partying, and we've all seen the photos, I was doing search and rescue missions in the military. Every Canadian has met a Justin Trudeau in their lives. Privileged, entitled, and always looking out for number one. He was looking out for number one when he called this expensive and unnecessary election in the middle of a pandemic. A $600 million power grab. An election that has done nothing to stop the fourth wave. It's only made things worse by taking the government's eye off the ball. That's not leadership. It's self-interest. And it's Justin Trudeau through and through. Where I grew up, you worked hard for everything you had. Even when you didn't have a lot, you always tried to help others. Your character and work ethic would earn the respect of your neighbors. That's my approach to leading Canada's Conservatives. We are here to work hard to earn your support. We're here to earn your votes. In Justin Trudeau's world, he takes you and your votes, your support, for granted. That's why he called an election in the middle of a pandemic. That's why he was more interested in a power grab than evacuating Canadians and our allies from Afghanistan. That's why he hid public health briefings, because they'd look bad for him. That's why he took his eye off the ball as forest fires raged. Instead of spending $600 million on an election, imagine what that money could have done for our hospitals, for mental health, for border security. At the very least, you'd expect that Justin Trudeau would give a clear vision for the country. Some sense that the sacrifice he forced on Canadians would be worth it. Has he? Not at all. He's lunged from one wedge issue to another, dividing Canadians, attacking premiers, blaming others for his shortfalls. Today, I'd planned to talk about maternity and parental leave, about making sure that when parents have children, they get the time they need to adjust to parenthood, to learn and to spend those precious moments with the new members of their family. I wanted to talk about the $1,000 a month that Canada's Conservatives would let parents earn to help them stay connected to the workforce, about how we will expand the Canada Child Benefit to provide expectant parents with payments beginning at the 7th month of pregnancy rather than at childbirth. And I wanted to talk about all of our ideas in Canada's recovery plan, about the issues that really matter to Canadians. Every day in this campaign, I've stood up and talked about how we could make Canada a better place. I launched Canada's recovery plan on the first full day of this election because I love this country and I want to tackle the challenges we are facing to secure a brighter and better future. That's the election we should be having. That's the discussion that Canada's leaders owe to the country. That's the discussion you deserve in this election. But Justin Trudeau isn't interested in a serious debate about issues, because what matters to him isn't maternity leave, your home, your retirement security, your job. What matters to him is his job. Justin Trudeau ne veut pas avoir des débats sérieux sur les enjeux importants. Tous ceux qui comptent pour lui, ce ne sont pas les congés de maternité, votre logement, votre sécurité à la retraite ou votre emploi. Tout ce qu'il veut, c'est conserver son poste. That's why he'll say anything to get elected, regardless of the damage it does to our country. That's why he'll promise anything, so long as he thinks it will buy him some votes. That's why he'll threaten anything if he doesn't get his way. Don't believe me? Ask Jody Wilson-Raybould. The SNC-Lavalin scandal shredded Mr. Trudeau's reputation as a feminist, as a proponent of reconciliation, as someone we can trust to know the difference between right and wrong. Over the coming days, we must decide whether or not we want to reward Justin Trudeau for breaking his promise and calling an unnecessary $600 million election in the middle of a pandemic. I didn't ask for this campaign, but nearly every day in this campaign, I've stood up and proposed practical solutions to secure our future and make life better, easier, and more affordable for ordinary people. Friends, I got into politics for one reason. The same reason I served in the Air Force for 12 years. The same reason that in business I volunteered my time for charitable causes. The same reason I ultimately stood for election, to serve my country. Canadians deserve better than a leader concerned only about his own power. But this is a pattern. Day after day, month after month, year after year, the only thing he and the Liberal Party prioritize is their own survival. More of the same spending and debt, $424 million per day, with more of the same on its way. More of the same corruption, more cover-ups, more lies, more entitlement, more being taken for granted, more of the same. Justin Trudeau often wants to pretend that this is 2015, that he's not running on his record, but on distant memories from the past. Well, it's not 2015, Mr. Trudeau. I am a new Conservative leader. And the Justin Trudeau of 2015 is not the Justin Trudeau of 2021. In 2015, I disagreed with him, but I could respect him. I could agree when he talked about what unites us rather than divides us. I could understand when he talked about a better future Canada could have. I could appreciate when he talked about healing the country's rifts, not exploiting them. Where is that Justin Trudeau? Where is that guy? What would the Sunny Ways Justin think of the Prime Minister we see today? The one who is clinging to power by dividing the country, fostering fear and division, sowing myth-truths and misinformation wherever he goes. The one who says he's a feminist, but pressured a woman to lie to cover up his corruption. The one who preaches honesty and transparency while funneling cash to Liberal insiders. The one who talks about reconciliation while suing Indigenous children. The one who talks about the environment while pumping record emissions into the air. The one who says one thing and then immediately does the opposite. I'd say he's all talk and no action, but this is worse. A person so blinded by his own ambition that he can't see the rot in his own party. A man who is not a feminist, not an environmentalist, not a public servant. A man who's focused solely and squarely on himself. I've never pretended to be something I'm not. What you see is what you get. I've said this many times. I'm not a celebrity. I'm in politics for one reason: public service. To get things done. To make this country better. That's why I created Canada's Recovery Plan. You know, Justin Trudeau loves to talk about leadership, but leadership is about delivering. It's about getting things done. It's about service above self in the country's best interests. Day after day, hour after hour, month after month, it's about standing up, being honest, treating Canadians with the respect they deserve. And what's Mr. Trudeau's record? $424 million being borrowed every day. More spending, more borrowing, more debt, multiple ethical investigations and cover-ups, soaring prices for houses, for food, for lumber, for childcare. 6 years. 6 years of inaction, of empty promises, of doing the bare minimum and then asking Canadians to be thankful that he even tried. 6 years of ignoring the fact that life is getting harder from coast to coast. 6 years of promising everything and delivering nothing but more debt and nothing to show for it. 6 years of underfunding our healthcare system. 6 years of ruining our economy So we can't afford the doctors, the nurses, and our healthcare professionals. 6 years of show, 6 years of inaction, 6 years of letting Canadians down again and again and again. And you'd think an election would at least focus his mind. But no, this is a prime minister who, as costs soared, said he doesn't think about monetary policy. A prime minister who said that the economy was bouncing back, quote, very strongly, the same day we got confirmation that it was actually shrinking. A prime minister who will say anything to win. So here is my pledge. Our country desperately needs a change. One party alone has put out a clear, honest plan for recovery, an ambitious vision for our country's recovery. That's Canada's Conservatives and Canada's recovery plan. My promise to Canadians, we have a plan, Canada's recovery plan, to recover 1 million jobs, to clean up the mess and corruption in Ottawa, to deliver a new mental health action plan, to dedicate nearly $60 billion more to public health care, to balance the budget, to build 1 million more homes, and hundreds more ideas to make Canada's future better and brighter. For Canadians, the choice is clear. Do we reward Mr. Trudeau for calling an unnecessary $600 million election in the middle of a pandemic? Make no mistake, a vote for anyone other than Canada's Conservatives is a vote for more of the same from Mr. Trudeau. More of the same being taken for granted. More corruption, more spending, more debt, more lies. Don't fall for the politics of fear. Justin Trudeau started this election, but you can finish it. Send him a message. Tell him what you think about a pandemic election. You can vote for a better future. We as a country can do better. We can be a country with better politics, with incomes that are going up, costs that are going down, employment going up, strife and disunity going down. Better health care, less homelessness, more affordable childcare, better services, more homes, more accountability, more mental health services. A healthier, wealthier, happier Canada is within our reach. These are real and tangible things that a government can deliver if it keeps its eye on the ball and focuses on you. If it focuses on action rather than words. If it puts the national interest first. I love this country, and I know you do too. Our best days are on the horizon, but we desperately need unity and a way forward. So vote for Canada. Vote for a brighter future. Vote to secure the future, and vote Conservative. Je vous remercie. Thank you very much.
We will now be taking questions. Nous allons maintenant prendre les questions.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. Travis Danraj, CBC News. I just want to circle back to your platform, particularly on gun control. Today is the 15th anniversary of the Dawson College shooting. Now, yesterday on CBC, you mistakenly said that the weapon used was illegally purchased. I'd like to know if you'd like to correct the record on that. And can you tell the victims of the shooting, like Kathleen Dixon, who jumped on top of her daughter to shield her from bullets, if the Beretta CX-4 Storm, which left one dead and many injured, will be permanently banned under a Conservative government?
Well, first, I want to say to the families of the victims that my thoughts are with them and always with the victims of violence and crime in our society. And I do want to take the opportunity to clarify that I was referring to the illegal transport and storage of that firearm. And let me also reiterate what I've said throughout this campaign, which is we will maintain restrictions in place, keep people safe, focus on taking the politics out of public safety, and give police and frontline border services the tools they need to fight organized crime, the shootings we see in our cities, and the illegal smuggling of firearms. We have to work together to put the public safety of Canadians first. Mes pensées sont avec les familles des victimes de la fusillade à Dawson College. Je dois clarifier mes commentaires. L'arme fut utilisée, était transportée et entreposée dans une manière illégale. Et on va maintenir les restrictions en place sur les armes à feu et enlever la politique. Je vais investir dans nos policiers, dans leur lutte contre les gangs de rue et la contrebande. On doit avoir une approche plus sérieuse sur la sécurité publique.
With all due respect, Mr. O'Toole, that is the same talking point that you've given on this issue for over a week now. I'd like you to directly answer the crux of the question, which was not about restrictions while a review happens. It's about the specific weapon, the Beretta CX-4 Storm. Will it be permanently banned under a Conservative government?
Well, let me reiterate, all of the restrictions on firearms that are in place now will remain in place. I've also said that gun control and keeping firearms out of the hands of criminals is very important. As the father of young kids, we need to see safe communities. We also need to take the politics out of classification decisions so that these decisions are made based on facts and science, not by politicians using them at a time we should be having serious debates on public safety and security. I want Canadians to know, I want mayors who are fighting organized crime and the rise of shooting in their cities to know that we will make the investments to focus on safe communities.
Next question.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Mr. O'Toole, the distinction between illegal transport and storage compared to legally obtaining is no small distinction. And this is kind of at the crux of whether or not people should be able to purchase and continue to own these kinds of firearms. So could you discuss a little more? I mean, it does kind of undermine the idea that these firearms are owned legally only by responsible hunters and sports shooters.
Well, I've said we're going to keep the restrictions that are in place, focus on public safety and security while we take the politics out of the classification discussion. We've also, in our platform, provided more tools for law enforcement and medical professionals to be able to act if they feel there's a risk to public safety with respect to firearms. We're also giving major investments to police and to border officials to make sure that we get illegally smuggled weapons out of the hands of the criminal gangs. So I want Canadians to know, as a father of young kids, public safety, our safe communities, suburbs are very important, and we will focus our attention on keeping communities safe. On va maintenir les restrictions en place sur les armes à feu. On va cibler sur les gangs de rue et la contrebande parce qu'on a vu une augmentation pendant le gouvernement de M. Trudeau. Et on va avoir des règles pour les médecins et les policiers en ce qui concerne les armes à feu aussi parce qu'on a une approche sérieuse sur la sécurité publique.
You recently dropped a candidate for your party for Islamophobic Facebook posts, but you have another candidate who's running in Nova Scotia and Central Nova, Brian Mulrooney's old riding, who made kind of similar posts, posting fake news about Sharia law, questioning whether or not immigrants should get benefits, whether women should be allowed to wear the burqa in Canada, and also making a joke or reposting a joke, I assume it was a joke, about Muslims riding camels. And he stands as your candidate in Central Nova. How do you resolve those two separate ideas there?
Everyone standing as a candidate in this election for the Conservative Party is focused on bringing the country together, fighting against intolerance, and delivering on Canada's recovery plan. Every single member of our caucus will be relentlessly focused on these goals, and I have expectations of us running a positive campaign to bring the country together, because this campaign is being held for one reason only: Mr. Trudeau's own political ambition, not the well-being of the country. He's not putting forward any positive vision. He's attacking, dividing, attacking me, attacking premiers. It's all about himself with Mr. Trudeau, and so for our campaign, it will be positive. It will be about securing the future. These protests, this harassment of our frontline nurses, doctors, is completely unacceptable. We all owe a huge debt of thanks to our front lines, to those nurses, to the folks in our hospitals. I appreciate and respect them. So this type of harassment and protest in front of hospitals is completely unacceptable. We have to work together at a time of a crisis to fight COVID-19 together. That's why we're going to make record investments in our public healthcare system. That's why we're running a positive campaign to bring people together. Not like Mr. Trudeau, who's caused this campaign to be one where he offers no vision but only petty attacks.
Next question.
Chris Reynolds, Canadian Press. So on that subject, what specifically would you do to try to ensure Canadians can get into hospitals for treatment, for procedures, and would you hope to see law enforcement stop demonstrators from effectively blocking Canadians from accessing care?
I have great faith in our law enforcement and municipal officials to make sure that access to our frontline healthcare services will be there. There is the ability to peacefully protest and things like this, but to harass and to try and block people from accessing healthcare in a pandemic is completely unacceptable, and we have to send that clear signal. Now is the time for us to work together using all the tools we have, including vaccines, rapid tests, distancing, masks, in our fight against COVID-19. We need to come together as a country in this crisis, not divide ourselves.
Regarding today's announcement, the EI parental benefit ceiling as it stands is $595 per week. So it seems to me that earning $1,000 per month is less than the current nearly $2,400 per month possible under the system as it exists today. So I'm just trying to understand how your proposed change to EI parental benefits interacts with the rest of the system that already has provisions that do not penalize parents for working.
Thank you for the question, Chris. What we've announced today is on top of what is presently in the system. What we want to see is our EI system modernized and more flexible to meet the needs of Canadians, particularly women that want to keep a foot in the workforce with respect to maternity and other decisions. This will allow that to happen, allow a faster return to work, and we're going to make sure that all families get support in terms of childcare assistance, and families of the lower revenue spectrum get more help. We need to make our EI system more compassionate, meet the needs of Canadian families, and unlike Mr. Trudeau, who's not talked about any policy, anything to build a better country that works better for families, we've been putting out great ideas to modernize and make our EI system more compassionate. On doit donner plus de flexibilité pour les parents, particulièrement les femmes, d'avoir une étape dans le marché du travail et on va créer une politique pour ça. Nous sommes en train de moderniser notre système d'assurance d'emploi. C'est le temps d'aider les familles. On va aider toutes les familles aussi avec un programme sur la garde d'arrêt pour toutes les familles, particulièrement plus d'appui pour les familles à faible revenu. C'est un exemple de notre politique positive en pleine d'une élection où M. Trudeau, chaque jour, a dit seulement des politiques de division.
Next question.
Mr. O'Toole, Michael Couture with Global National. You just said earlier you never pretend to be something you're not. Yet at the beginning of this campaign and a couple of minutes ago, you said you're going to run a positive campaign. However, if we were listening to your opening comments, you did anything but talk positive. You attacked Mr. Trudeau very personally. So who is the real Erin O'Toole? The one who said he's running a positive campaign, or the one we just saw today?
This election is about trust. Who do you trust will secure the future for your family? And trust comes from leading and putting the interests of the country first. We are in a $600 million election only because Mr. Trudeau thought he could use this crisis for his own political advantage. He ignored fires in British Columbia, ignored the crisis in Afghanistan. He ignored the vote in Parliament saying there'd be no election. He breaks promises after promises after promises on everything from the economy to reconciliation to the environment. Canadians shouldn't trust Mr. Trudeau to bring our country together, secure our health and economy after COVID. So I'm inviting Canadians to look at the 6 years of Mr. Trudeau, how he's let them down time after time after time. And who do you trust in this election to build a stronger, more united country? Dans cette élection, c'est une question de leadership entre M. Trudeau et moi. Nous sommes en pleine d'une élection inutile de 600 millions de dollars à cause de M. Trudeau. Il a ignoré les feux de forêt en Colombie-Britannique. Il a ignoré la situation en Afghanistan. Il est toujours là pour lui et ses amis. Et les Canadiens, les Québécois méritent un gouvernement totalement ciblé sur leur bien-être, un gouvernement éthique et prêt. Et j'invite tous les Canadiens d'examiner mon bilan, notre plan pour le rétablissement du Canada et le bilan de M. Trudeau.
I also want to follow up on today's announcement, which you didn't go into detail about because you were being, some would say, were being negative. But you're proposing to offer the Canada Child Benefit starting at the 7th month of pregnancy. So would you build in protective language into this regulation, making it clear the benefit is not intended to infer legal standing on the fetus itself? And how would you ensure that making a pregnant person eligible for child benefit would not inadvertently set a precedent where a fetus is defined as a person under the law or open the door to restrictions on abortion?
I am pro-choice, and I will defend the right for women to make decisions on their own health care as Prime Minister, as I have as a parliamentarian. This program today is about helping families, helping them prepare for a growing family. Rebecca and I remember before Molly's birth, the cribs, the rooms, the stroller, all of the costs. We have a cost of living crisis in Canada right now. We're going to be helping families. We're going to be helping seniors. We're going to be helping Canadians get ahead. The alternative is more debt, higher taxes, and more division with Mr. Trudeau.
Next question.
Ian Bailey, Globe and Mail. Mr. O'Toole, the tone of your remarks opening this event today, can we assume from them, do they indicate that you're concerned that victory may be slipping away, that you may be sort of falling behind the Liberals in this last week of the campaign?
I'm concerned that Mr. Trudeau called an election, a $600 million election, with no vision for the future, no plan, broke his own promise when he did so, and is only trying to divide Canadians, misleading people, dividing premiers versus the federal government, and just promising unlimited debt, higher taxes, and continued cover-ups and scandals. So I want Canadians to look. In the last week, the Conservatives have a plan to secure our economic recovery after COVID-19. We have an ethical leader who actually has a track record of getting things done. And I think Canadians deserve change. So I want them to look at why we're in this election and vote for change.
On another subject, the Global Times, which has close ties to the Chinese government, has denounced a quote-unquote unusually hostile language in the Conservative Party's platform on China, and is warning of a quote counter-strikes if it's ever enacted. Two things. Do the presence, you've talked about the things you will do, the policies you'll enact if you become Prime Minister on China. Does the presence of the two Michaels in China, though, limit your ability to be that assertive? And do you have any worries about being too assertive and compromising the Canada-Chinese relationship?
No, I will always stand up for Canadian citizens, including the two Michaels. I'll always stand up for our economic interests, trade, security, and I'll always stand up for our values. Canada was a country that led the fight against apartheid. We created an approach globally to human rights. And under Mr. Trudeau, we've seen him not even show up for a vote on human rights. We've seen Mr. Trudeau from the very first days being too cozy and completely out of step with the communist regime in China. This is another example of it's time for a change. It's time for Canada to have a serious leader, once again focused on the well-being of Canadians and making sure that Canada once again plays our role fighting for human rights, fighting for our workers on the world stage.
Next question.
Hi, Mr. O'Toole. Paula Newton from CNN. Thanks so much for taking the question. If the Conservative Party forms a government next week, can you be categorical and specific about what kind of results Canadians might see in their relationship with the United States within, let's say, a six month to 1 year framework?
Well, we have to restore our long-standing and traditional close relationship with the United States on trade, on North American security, and on security and our interests around the world. Mr. Trudeau has been out of step now with 3 presidents, and we've seen a terrible relationship with the cancellation of a pipeline on the first day of the Biden presidency. Line 5 is at risk. We see tariffs for softwood lumber going up. We see Buy American, between a relationship that led the world on trade, that led the world through NORAD on partnering for our homeland security. And I think Canada's voice is needed alongside the United States and our Five Eyes allies to stand up to communist China and their influence in a negative way for human rights and global trade. So I hope to restore that relationship back to the strong, proud alliance of neighbors, family, and friends that it needs to be.
And just as a follow-up for people around the world who may just be tuning in to the Canadian election, how would you describe your brand of conservatism? How is it different or similar to that of the Republican Party in the United States?
Canada's Conservatives are a party of all Canadians. We're a big tent party that focuses on fighting for small business and entrepreneurs, that stand up for strong families and strong communities, that's going to tackle issues facing those communities from mental health to addiction. I'm a new Conservative leader with a new style. I served in the military, in Canada's armed forces, worked in the private sector. I worked my way up the ranks of politics. We need less of the politics of celebrity, less of the politics of division that we've seen under Mr. Trudeau, and more of a positive politics that the Conservative Party is bringing in Canada with our plan for Canada's economic recovery.
Next question.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. Chris Selly from the National Post. With a week to go, polls do not suggest that if the election were held today, the polls do not suggest you would be in a position to become Prime Minister after the votes were counted. What do you think you need to do over the final week to move the needle?
We're in this election because Justin Trudeau hoped he could use the pandemic for his own political interests. I trust Canadians. I know they're ready for change. They're ready for a government that puts them first, not Mr. Trudeau's political job first. They're ready for a plan for our economic recovery after COVID-19. And we're going to work relentlessly every day of this last week to talk about our positive vision for getting Canada back on track and bringing unity back to this country, something Mr. Trudeau cannot offer Canadians. And people have seen Mr. Trudeau cannot be trusted on literally every issue, and it's time to have a leader that will deliver, not just say the nice words.
You talk about your positive campaign. I think anyone who's been following your campaign would know that today was a marked change in tone towards Mr. Trudeau personally. I mean, you basically said you don't even respect him personally. Can we expect to hear more of these attacks for the rest of the campaign?
Like so many Canadians, I'm disappointed that we're in a campaign in the fourth wave of the pandemic. Think of what we could do with $600 million for our long-term care, for the CHSLD in Quebec, to help families struggling with the cost of living crisis. Mr. Trudeau's put his own political interests ahead of the national interests, and I am disappointed with that. I am disappointed being reminded of the SNC Lavalin affair, where he tried to force one of his cabinet ministers to lie as part of his cover-ups. I'm tired of Mr. Trudeau promising everything and delivering nothing. So in this last week, I invite Canadians, take a real look. Do you want to reward Mr. Trudeau with this pandemic election? Or do you want a positive change with a plan to bring the country together and secure our economic future?
This will be the last question. Ce sera la dernière question.
Joanne Lossius at the Ottawa Citizen. You've previously said that building digital infrastructure to connect all of Canada to high-speed internet will be done by 2025. Can you tell us a little bit more about this plan and how much it would cost?
We have to end the digital divide in Canada that all Canadians have seen with COVID. We have to accelerate our high-speed connectivity in all parts of this country. Mr. Trudeau's promising 2030. We will do it by 2025 by making it a top priority, by having a minister responsible for the delivery, by partnering with the private sector and investing to make sure that we can close the margin for communities. This is something I've talked about with Jennifer here. It's a priority for all parts of the Greater Ottawa region, particularly here. We need to have a government that delivers. Mr. Trudeau never delivers on promises, from the budget to safe drinking water to ethics and transparency. It's time for a government that delivers.
Has any costing been done on this?
There are already funds in infrastructure that have been set aside that Mr. Trudeau does not deploy. The parliamentary budget officer says he only gets about 60% of what he promises out the door. We will deliver. There are 6 programs in Mr. Trudeau's government focusing on delivering high-speed connectivity. We will take that down to 1 and deliver it by 2025 with the funding that is there and whatever is needed to get that goal done.
It will be all for today. Ce sera tout pour aujourd'hui. Merci. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.